path to winning isn't easy. Shoulder instability and dislocations and your ERISA disability claim. Now, shoulder instability occurs when the joint becomes loose, either because of trauma or the degenerative changes or even repetitive strain. Patients will tell you that they feel like their shoulder is about to pop out, a sensation sometimes called a dead arm. And in severe cases, the shoulder actually dislocates, meaning that the humeral head slides completely out of the socket. There are 3 types of dislocations, and I don't think the disability carriers understand this. The first is anterior, the second is posterior, then the third is inferior. Once the shoulder is dislocated, by the way, it's prone to happening again, creating a cycle of instability and damage. I have clients who will just roll over in bed and the shoulder will dislocate. Now, I will tell you that disability insurance carriers and plans often misunderstand the seriousness of instability and dislocation. They expect that after initial treatment, rest, therapy, injections, you're going to recover. And if you don't, they're going to argue that you should have surgery, and that surgery would have fixed the problem. And of course, if you don't have surgery, they're going to whipsaw that and say, oh, well, it can't be that bad. But as I've said, repeated dislocations can happen even with minor movements, rolling over in bed, reaching for a cup, typing at a desk. This unpredictability can make work practically impossible, because you may not be able to work safely. You may not be able to do just simple routine tasks that your employer would expect that you be able to do. And obviously, this can result in you being off task and ultimately missing time from work. What are carriers looking for in these types of claims? Well, they're going to be reviewing, first off, your therapy notes. There's a wealth of information in physical therapy notes, and sometimes I have to remind my clients not to be so vocal about their activities. Physical therapists, are nice people. They ask, how are you doing? What are you doing? What are you able to do with your shoulder? What problems are you doing? And, you might have gone to Disney for the weekend and gotten on a ride that you probably shouldn't have gotten on, or, pushed your child in a stroller, or done some other type of activity that's not necessarily consistent with what's really going on with your shoulder. The disability carrier is going to seize on that type of activity and say, well, wait a second, what they're doing is inconsistent. They really can't be as bad off as they say they are. And by the way, I think we maybe should put some surveillance on them, or let's go look at their social media stuff. And so again, this is really important. I also want you to remember that after 2 years, the definition of disability changes from an inability to do your own occupation to an inability to do any occupation. And as a matter of course, basically, you have to prove that you can't even do sedentary work using bilateral manual dexterity. And I said you, because ultimately disability carriers will have your medical records reviewed and cherry-picked by their liar for hire doctors, who will say, yeah, you may have some problems, but you're still able to do some sort of a sedentary job. You are still able to use your shoulder in some function, and you could do, sedentary type work. And therefore, we're going to deny your claim, even though you actually may be a one-armed policyholder, if you will, based on the functionality of your shoulder. Now, if that sort of game starts to be played, you should do a couple things. Obviously, you should be consulting with an experienced ERISA disability attorney. But if you haven't been, you really need to have your doctor document your functional restrictions and limitations. It might be that you need to undergo some repeat diagnostic studies to show the continued severity and problem of your shoulder. Or you might want to undergo a functional capacity evaluation, which is an objective measure of the function of your abilities. And they will test your ability to use your arm, the range of motion, the strength, those sorts of things. Because at the end of the day, you need to protect yourself. Ultimately, if this claim is denied for any of these shoulder conditions, you'll only have 180 days in which to file an appeal, and the appeal is the trial of your case. You need to put forward every piece of evidence, And before you do that, obviously you need to get a copy of the claims file because you want to understand what their medical providers had to say about your shoulder condition, your functionality, what your restrictions and limitations might be, so that you can go about challenging it. Your attorney should obviously not only get a copy of that file, but your medical records, reading both in conjunction cover to cover to understand, well, what are the weaknesses or problems in this case, and what's our strategy going to be? Often in my ERISA disability cases, I use shoulder residual functional capacity forms because I'm also a Social Security disability lawyer. These forms ask the right questions about the functionality of a person's shoulder, not the kind of APS questions that you see in the forms that they want your doctors to fill out. And I often use that as a starting point for taking apart the carrier doctor's opinion. I wanted to know, did they think about this problem, this problem, this problem? What is it they had to say? Is that consistent with what your doctor had to say? Do we need to get a functional capacity evaluation to address all of these bogus cherry-picked reasons that the carrier's doctor has come up with? Or do we need to get an IME? And ultimately, of course, we need to tie this all together. We need to establish the objective basis of the restrictions and limitations. But from a vocational standpoint, we need to attack their opinion that you could do your own occupation or any occupation based on the physical requirements of each. You can see that this is not a simple matter. Carriers don't understand shoulders. They don't understand the anatomy, the diagnostic studies, the results of the testing, the treatment, the complications of surgery, and the postoperative functional limitations. And of course, if your shoulder condition is painful, you're going to be taking pain medication. And disability carriers just don't understand the side effects of pain medication on top of the pain and discomfort that you already have. Got it? This isn't an easy area, and carriers will screw this one up all the time. Thanks for listening to today's episode of Winning Isn't Easy. If you found this episode helpful, please take a moment to like our page, leave a review, share it with our friends and your friends and family. And of course, subscribe to this podcast. Join us next week for another insightful episode of Winning Isn't Easy. Thanks for listening.